right, welcome everybody to our April Friday Live. Friday Live is our FileMaker and FM BetterForms community meetup. This month we have, I'm kind of excited actually, Vince Menanno and then Brendan Pierce from Beeswax are going to be joining us. If you had a chance to see the email, Vince had done a presentation at Engage U last November in Antwerp, and I just watched it because I wasn't able to attend it, and it's really good. I think there's a lot of really good takeaways from that, so hopefully we can talk a little bit about some stuff there. We also have Technique Corner. We're going to talk about, if the time allows, we'll talk about ham and some new ways that we're using that, as well as some latest updates, and we have some finish up with our regular draw. Once again, the meeting is recorded, right? You can find all the links at Awesome BetterForms. That is a link that's available from our website, as well as you can find it on our YouTube channel, and our marketing person usually posts that about a week later. Couple quick things. We went to the Build, Grow, Learn conference that was in Greenville last week, I think it was. And this is a really interesting conference. This was not your typical FileMaker conference, which is normally based on technical things, and maybe 20% of that is kind of business management. Imagine you took all of those, project scoping, all of the soft skills, business management stuff, hiring people, all of that, and just had a conference on those topics. This is stuff I never used to care about, and I would like say, why are we wasting our time with this stuff? But now it's the things, as our business grows, it's the only things I care about, sort of, not so much on the technical side. I believe they're going to probably have another one next year. If you're looking to grow your business, you're maybe 1 to 2 to 3 developers, up to maybe 20, something in that business size. This is a really ideal conference to go to. It was put on by a group of 3 people: Joe Scarpetta from the Scarpetta Group, Susan Fenema from Beyond the Chaos, and Brendan Hayes, I think his last name is, from Kalos Consulting. And what was really good about this is they all brought a lot to the table. They had conference talks on themselves, but the guests that they brought in were pretty big heavy hitters, people who are managing 800 to 3,000 size team, and how they grew that team up there. They had people on HR and talks on that, how to hire people, how to terminate people. And these are all really important things on leadership, things on, maintaining corporate culture. There was talks on hybrid versus in-person and virtual teams. So really good conference. If you're interested in learning more about that and you want to, you can check out the website, and they have a number of links. They don't have links to the recordings. They weren't recorded, but you can at least get an idea of the topics. And those people also have a lot of blogs and such. So once again, if you do get a chance to go to it next year, I would really recommend it if you're looking at growing your business. Quick reminder, we did do a base code deployment or update about a month and change ago, and we talked about this. If you haven't already, your apps would have been migrated to BF Legacy. Make sure you, in your development environment, update to BF Latest. There's a number of bug fixes and a number of significant improvements and things like that in performance. So check that out. If you do have any problems with compatibility or anything, let us know. So far, we haven't had anything. It's pretty stable. That version has been out for maybe 6 months or something like that in its entirety. And if you're wanting to be able to take advantage of that caching that we talked about a couple Friday Lives ago, you want to build a progressive web app we talked about last month, you'll have to update to that. At some point towards July, we'll force everybody up, so it's best that you update early to see in case there's any issues. All right, I'm going to flip it over to Hassan. Hassan is our product owner for BetterForms, and he is going to show us some updates that he's been working on.
Hey guys, I'll take it away here and share my screen. I hope everyone can see my screen here. Yeah, some basic updates. So I'm sure a lot of you guys are used to this action scripts over here in your page builder. What we've gone ahead and done is the global action scripts over here. We've also updated to use the same thing. So this will come out on the next release. So over here, you can also add a new script. Let's add one right here. I'm sure a lot of you guys know how this already works. I'll add an action here. Let's give it an alert. And there we go, we got an alert action here. And now on this page over here, I've gone ahead and called it test, and we can just see how the button works. So this is just calling a global action. Oh, let me just fix this here. Let me add the action again. Alert. There we go. Now if I refresh this page, there we go. Now the global action editor also works. So we have this actions editor added to the global section, so everything feels more consistent through the app. And now another thing I wanted to share, which is kind of a bigger change, is we've added a change log. And we've had this for some time, but it wasn't really visually appealing or updated as much. So now if you go over to the help section, you can click change log under references. And over here, you can see all the latest known issues that are happening in the BetterForms app, all the versions that have been pushed out and changes. This is still being updated, but this is where the new stuff you'll see will come. So this can give you a better update of what's going on in the BetterForms app.
This was inspired by Chris Conger, who built this. So Chris, sorry, we stole some of your idea there. We thought it was pretty good. We thought you nailed that pretty good. So I think actually yours ended up being even is better than ours. But
all good. Well, I appreciate it.
so
I'm sure I'll steal some of this for ours.
yeah, I think this will help people understand the changes. This is kind of a request from our community. So it's a real challenge when you have three different code bases and how do you display that data. And I'm not sure if we hit it perfectly. So once you start using that, do please let us know and we'll make adjustments accordingly.
And that's all for some of the latest BF updates.
I want to show everybody something that is new. Let me just get this ready. This is all right. There we go. I want to show you something that's new. We're working with our AI assistant. We're really excited about. We've added some two major new features. These will be rolling out. The features that Pearson just mentioned will go out in our next deployment, which will be sometime mid next week, and then 2 weeks after that, we'll release these new assistant updates. I want to give you an idea what we can do with them and what we've changed. So I was at this Build, Learn, Grow conference, and I was making some notes. So this is my notebook. They gave us a notebook, and I took a screenshot. And I may just do that now. I'll just take a screenshot of this notes because they talked about having a company culture dashboard. Right. And that was sort of one of the ideas that came up was like, what are you doing to maintain, company culture and policy and all that stuff? So I just kind of whipped up a fake dashboard. Mine's pretty cheesy looking. You can see it's not really to scale or very accurate, but I just took a screenshot of that. And I'm going to jump over to BetterForms here, and I'm going to go into our development data. And from our development data, so normally we can, I'm just going to actually paste this. So normally what we can do is we can use the AI assistant to generate information. But one of the main differences now is we have this multimodal or visual interface. So you can actually paste a screenshot. Now it was a pretty crude screenshot, as you recall. Let's see. And I haven't done it with this one, so bear with me on this. But the sorry, downloads. There we go. That screenshot was pretty gnarly. I'll just leave that over here. So I want to maybe create a dashboard from this. So I'm going to start off with just create some JSON data that I can use to drive this dashboard. All right. So one of the big changes that we've made is we've added streaming. So now you get real-time live updates of your data. So there's no more waiting in that blind time when you're not sure if it's crashed or what it's doing. So, and there it is. It's created some data and I can use that. Data's not bad, but let me just make some changes to this data. Change these news items content to real data instead of lorem ipsum, period. Make the articles about sales techniques, for a software consultancy company. You can also change the title too, period. All right, so let's just update that data, make this data a little bit more accurate. Now, of course, this data would naturally come from your FileMaker server, right? So enhancing client engagement, effective cold calling strategies, you get an idea. So this data was generated from those scribbles, if you will, the concept of that. What's really, really cool here is it understands this is news, that this is an array. So if you're worrying about like, how do I go about building this page, right? There's exactly how you can structure that data. All right, so that's pretty good. Let's go over to our main editor here. Let's paste that image in again. Build this dashboard using my data. All right, so now we come up and let me just put this a little wider here. You can see the dashboard starting to get built. Now, what's pretty cool is that progress bar became that, right? The 3 blocks, 7 policies. It didn't actually, it's interesting that it didn't get the progress bar for the policies. That's kind of maybe my drawing wasn't the most accurate. And there's our latest articles. Let's make some changes to that now. Make this a little bit more colorful. Actually, let's make some others. Add and edit tertiary button to the right side of the policies and add a read more for each article. These buttons should call named actions appropriately named and pass in whatever data is needed. So I'm going to add some buttons on here. Right. And it's going to rebuild this, add some color onto it. And you can see there's my policies. I'm not really too keen on that. We probably want to drill that one in a little bit more. It's added some color onto here. And here's my latest items with my read more buttons. All right. It also gave it a little description of what it's done here as well and how it's called the named actions. And those named actions would be like the actions that that Hassan has just demonstrated. That's one example. I'll show you one more example I think is pretty cool too. You can do the same thing I did it from a drawing, which is that's pretty crude. You can go through and redefine all of these things. But the real takeaway here is this is an actual progress bar, right? If I jump to that and I find that 52% here and change it to 5%, you can see the progress changed, right? It'll change it to 20%, 50%, and so on. So you get an idea. It's actually real data here. So as soon as FileMaker generates this data, we already have it connected to our interface. And for the most part, our dashboard is almost finished. We might want to make some changes to this section here. I'll show you one more final example and then we'll carry on. So I think this one's a kind of a cool one as well. This is hotels.com and we're just getting ready for some upcoming trips. Pearson and I are going to be going to a Figma conference there. I'm looking forward to that on UX. And we also have .fmp coming up in Berlin. So I'm going to take a screenshot of that. And where are we? Oops. And let's jump and I'm going to actually erase all of this stuff here. We'll start again. And actually erase all of this as well. All right. So this time I took the hotel.com interface, generate some data that I can use to drive this hotel selector interface. Our current AI assistant can generate all of this stuff without the visual input, right? And you don't see the streaming, so you're waiting. And even though it takes 30 seconds is a really long time to wait when you don't see anything. All right, so there is our data. It's actually normalized to search. I posted the video of the same thing earlier in our Slack if you're part of our community. And so, oops, I guess that's my bad. I forgot to turn this off. Let me see if I can undo this. There we go. All right, so there's my data there. And normalized search, so that's pretty good. And let's jump over to here. Let's do the same thing. and we'll say, generate this hotel selector interface. And give it a second. It takes an extra 2 or 3 seconds to process the image. I think that's a reasonable time. If you're interested to learn more about how the code actually works behind the scene, let us know and we'll feature it maybe on the next Friday Live. But here it is. Now, the real takeaways here is even these items, I mean, you could probably put some padding to the right of that. That's just a prompt to adjust that. But even these items here, 1 booking, 2 saves, that is actual data here. So you see here is count, this is right here, 2 saves, change that to 20, and now the 20 saves just went up. So your interface is already live. I think that's really, I can't swear on this, but I think it's really blanking cool. I'm really excited about releasing this in the next few weeks. And it'll be available. I think it's going to be behind a paid plan. It'll be behind the pro plan, most likely, instead of a citizen developer plan. And the main reason for that is there is an additional cost that we have to incur on that. So we have to have some return there. But I hope you like that. That's coming up very soon. We're going to be releasing that. The other bonus here as well is the streaming API that we built will be available for everybody in the community. It's built into part of BetterForms, and this particular interface is using BetterForms messaging to talk to the app. So you can build all of this type of stuff directly in your apps if you want as well. All right, if you have any questions on that, let me know, and we'll carry on. Somebody close my keynote here. Give me a quick sec here and we'll pull that back up again. All right, we're going to jump to our main guest. I want to welcome Vince Mennano from Beeswax. Welcome, Vince. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Charles. Nice to be here. And hi to everyone.
Vince, where are you located right now?
In Boca Raton, Florida.
Yeah, because I know every time I see you, we're always in different places there, and you tend to visit all of the events and such. So we never know.
Yeah, we lived in Germany for 2 years. That was a lot of fun. I got to learn some German. Our kids are fluent in German, although I was born and raised in Montreal, so I speak Italian, French, English, and German was a challenge for me. It wasn't easy, but a lot of fun. Cool.
All right. Yeah. If you want to take it away, by all means.
All right. So I just want to say to everybody that I've given a lot of these presentations, and Charles wanted this one to be different. And I'm really eager to just dive in at any point in time, kind of like listening to an album and you go listen to your favorite tracks, so to speak, right? So this isn't going to be a re-presentation of what we've done. So this is just going to be kind of jumping all over the place, and I'm totally fine with anybody stopping and asking questions, etc. So if you feel like you have a question, you just can maybe raise your hand or something, or Charles can spot that and just unmute yourself. And I'd rather like this be a discussion than anything else. So, all right. So with that said, I'm going to dive into some of my favorite things about this release and the big differences between this and the prior versions, so to speak. And so I'll do that. So let me kind of jump ahead here and play this one. And let me know if you are seeing my screen.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, cool. So with every prior version of Inspector, even up to Inspector 7, what we were doing was we were processing the DDR. So the DDR is an XML representation of the metadata in your FileMaker files, and it's all in XML. And what we were doing is processing this XML. And every analysis, so Inspector had support for multiple solutions, and every solution had support for multiple analyses. But the problem is that every time we run it, we would process all the data. So if you had a large system where you had maybe, a few 100,000 records that would represent all the items across fields, tables, value lists, layouts, etc., and you had 20 or 30,000 calculations and 30,000 dependencies. That's not unrealistic. That's pretty much like a modest size system, let's say. Maybe the item number is a little bit high, but nonetheless, it's like, it's a lot of records. Every time you run another analysis, it would just gobble all that information up again. And so over 100 analyses, not only would it take more time because it's slow down because FileMaker, the updating the indexes and all this takes time, but what would happen is your file size would grow as well. So that was 7. With 8, what we did is we dramatically changed this approach because we're no longer using the DDR, we're using Save as XML. And Save as XML has has a lot of changes, but one of the major changes is it has a catalog structure. And so we're reading the catalog structure, seeing what changed, and only update the changes where they had occurred. So like we went from this to this. So now what we're doing is the first analysis is basically gobbling up everything. And then every subsequent analysis is just the deltas of what's changed, which is really, really cool because not only is it saving the amount of data that's stored, but it's incredibly fast because if you only have a few changes, it's basically in and out and documenting those changes and it's done. So in a sense, what's happened is it's keeping track of what you're doing in your solution. It's kind of assist or a one-to-one representation of your metadata that exists. So if you're refactoring your code, the footprint in Inspector is actually getting smaller. So you're removing code that's not needed, simplifying things, etc. Your footprint in Inspector is getting smaller. If you're adding code, it'll continue to grow. The only place where actual increases are happening is in the documentation, in the documenting of the changes and where they've occurred and who made them. So that's to me, this is one of the most exciting parts of this release is just that first off, we're switching over to Save as XML because we see that as the future. And secondly, because this allows us, to stay in touch with what's going on in the system. And not only that, it's, we're a large team at Beeswax. We're over 100 people. We don't do just FileMaker, but we do a lot of other development like Tableau and web and IT and AWS and all these kinds of things. And there's a lot of people there. And so because there's a lot of FileMaker developers, we like to collaborate. And this is a great tool for collaboration because one of the other things that is really nice about this release is that you host it on a server and it's basically transparent. So you can actually set up a script schedule. The schedule can run every 5 minutes, every 1 minute, every 2 minutes, whatever your preference is, or however long it takes to run an update on what's changed, right? And so that can run in the background, and your developers don't even know it's running. You just kind of get to your work and do your work, and it's happening. The nice thing is if you do allow the developers to run it, they can add a comment as to what's changed. And so like, I just fixed this script. I made some changes here because, this is fixing that bug that the client reported, etc. Any questions with all of this?
Yeah, Vince, you said the catalog. So XML now exports the diffs themselves. Is that
no? What it does is So what it does is let me see if I can bring up something to show you.
Or you can detect the diffs really easily now.
You can detect them pretty easily. It's not how do you say? It's not completely going to give you all the changes because unless you run it, you're not processing the XML. There's no background processing that's that's going to pick up a change when it occurs. But so like over here, you'll see that there's these catalogs, right? So file access catalog, base table catalog, table occurrence catalog. And so at a higher level, the data is structured by these catalogs. And then the catalogs have themselves a modification count, right? And then they have a username, account name, a timestamp, and a UUID. All right. So each catalog has these attributes, and then the items themselves also have those attributes for the most part. It's not consistent. It's not everywhere, but for the most part. So like this is the table occurrence catalog. There's one table occurrence. That's this table occurrence right here. And right here, you'll see the UUID is over here. And then you have the timestamp and the last change timestamp of who did it and how many modifications were made to that table occurrence. So as soon as you make a change, not only the modification count for that item changes, but the timestamp and the account name of who touched it. And then at the catalog level, that also gets updated. So that's what we're reading. We're reading the catalog, we're seeing the changes, and then we're processing only the things that have changed. Does that answer your question, Charles?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So the catalogs didn't exist in the DDR before. And so this is a huge benefit to us, is that and the community. Basically, now we have a way to see that. However, I will say that like if you make a change to a script and you don't run it, you don't process the changes, and then someone else comes along and makes changes to a script and then runs it, your changes are not documented because you haven't run it, you haven't processed it. So
I think that's reasonable too. I mean, in fairness, in the rest of the code world, if I make a change and somebody was to use my IDE and not commit that change, which is effectively that snapshot,
right.
But I guess so from a working practice, you would encourage your team to say, okay, once you've done a scope of work, a little piece, trigger the snapshot type of thing.
Right. It's not perfect in the sense that like if you have it running on a schedule, which we have had in the past. So while we build inspector, we had inspector analyzing inspector. So it's generating the XML for inspector. It's running it every few minutes. And so it could be anywhere. Like if you make a lot of changes and then you run it, you're going to see like anywhere between 15 seconds to a minute or 2 minutes or more, right? So like if you don't run it for like a whole day and you've made a lot of changes, it's got to document all those changes and run it. But if you're running it and you're picking up all the changes that have happened along the way, so like you add a layout, you make some changes to some objects on the layout, you add a value list, you attach it to a field, and then it runs behind the scenes. That could be anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds. And now it's updated, it's current. You go check it, you can see when it ran, you can see who changed it, what changed, etc. So it's happening. The one drawback with that, again, is that you don't have the ability to add a comment. So like what your statement is like, I'm not finished my scope of work, I'm still working on it, but you're documenting like all the changes that as you see them, right? So some people might like it, some people might prefer to run it themselves. So but this kind of leads into another discussion, which is the integration, and this is the brainchild of Brendan, who's also Brendan is on this call right now, and he's him and I worked on this together, but he is without him, I don't think it would be the way it is today. It's just incredibly different, and it's a different animal. But so Brendan came up with this great these great integration methods, and I'll show a couple of them. So let's switch over to here. So let's see. So for example, let's just create a new file, and then I'll call this I'll create the inventory file, put it on the desktop. And so let's say I want to integrate this with inspector. So I'll create a solution, I'll call it inventory, and then I'll put the file name in here. Okay, and then save it. So now I have now have this new solution that I want to track analyses or XML for. And so I go in here, and all I do is we have an add-on that ships with Inspector. So I go ahead and add the add-on and then drag this add-on to the layout. And now I'll open it up and I'll put in this number right here, 554, 554. And now these two now are essentially linked together. And I'll put in a comment here. And if this file was hosted, basically it would just run the XML on the server, call Inspector and tell it, hey, I have an analysis for this solution ID. Can you process it? Here's the path to the XML. Go ahead and process it. I'm not going to run it because it's not hosted on the server, but that's it. That's as hard as it gets. And the beauty of this is one of the main goals of this release was to kind of never get in the way and always be kind of like always be ready. And so one of the things was, okay, I've added the solution ID. If I want to run it and not make a comment, so let's say I made a change and I go and I want to run it, instead of bringing up this dialogue and typing a whole message and hitting return, I can just hold the option key, press the button, and off it goes. So it's just completely kind of fluid. Like your trend of thought is like, I'm staying with my work. I'm just running it in the background. As a matter of fact, again, going back to the point of like running it with the schedule, I never even know it's running. I'm just continuing my work and it's documenting my changes. So that's one integration method. There's a few others, which is if I go from Inspector, I can trigger that integration directly from the API integration. And so what this will do is it'll call using FMP URL this script in this file. And so the file would be open. It'll call that script, and that script immediately runs on server. So in a sense, you can trigger it right from Inspector, and we'll do a little bit of that in just a moment. And so you just type a comment, hit return, and it's running. So there's two other integration methods, and they're kind of cool. One is I can manually let me open up that file again. So let me open up inventory. So here's inventory. And so if I could generate the XML for inventory, and I'll put it in a folder on my desktop. And I can say, manually upload it. So baseline, I hit return, it asks me for the file, the folder with the XML. I select it, it sends it to the server, and then it processes it on the server. So that's one way to do this, right? The interesting thing is you have manually upload, you have window names. So let's say make a change. I delete this object, let's say, and I go and I run it. And this time I'm just going to do window names. I give it the window name, and I give it deleted layout object, and I run it. And so what it's doing now is it generated the XML for that window, sent it to the server, and processed it. And then if we go look, we'll see the change, one modification, one deletion. So this layout was deleted, and the layout changed because I picked up the number of modifications on the layout and the number of objects on the layout that got changed. So that's that. But so the integration is really cool. The integration really, the goal of it is to get out of the way, to help you kind of run it and put a comment on there. But I will warn everyone that you shouldn't run manually upload or window names on, well, you can actually manually upload is fine because you'll have the XML already generated in some directory. And so it'll gobble up all that XML and send it to the server. Because the problem with both of these integrations is that it has to first, well, the window names one has to first generate the XML. And if you're on a file that's hosted, that's going to take a dramatically long time. Like even a small file would take a while. But if you do it on a production system of some kind, of any complexity, you're going to be waiting a long, long time, a lot longer than even DDR. So I wouldn't recommend using this or this if you have it hosted on a server, because you're incurring the cost of having to send it, not this one to have to send it because you have it locally, and this one to have to generate it and then send it. The better option is to use the integration method. And the integration method is, for example, if we go look at this file, which is the meetings file, if I go look at the meetings file and I go to here, and again, I just go and delete this object, and then I'll run it from here. And so now I have, I run it. And so now it's running directly on the server. It's generated the XML, it's processed it, and now we get our results, right? So I did the same exact thing. I made a deletion of a layout object, and the layout got mentioned as well. So so the integration, methods and options, I think turned out really, really great. So those are two of my favorite features in this release. Any questions?
Stephen had a question. Yeah, Stephen had a
Yeah.
question. If you're running as a schedule, what happens when you have schema open?
What happens if you have schema
Yeah,
open?
if you're running as a schedule, so I guess it's when
Uh-huh.
it's running on server side. What happens when the schema is open? Does that
I don't think that, I mean, it pulls whatever the latest of the data has been saved. So like
Yeah.
it's just pulling the state of whatever the state of the XML in that file is, right? So I don't think you're not writing data into that table. So it's not like, it's not like it's
Yeah,
blocked
scripts still
because of
run.
that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Script still runs.
So
So yeah. Any other
Vince,
questions?
how do you envision, like, what would so we got a team of say 3 people working on a file periodically, and they're in and out different parts, different areas throughout the course of the day. I'm looking at it for ourselves, for example. What would the typical workflow be like? So I would go in and I need to make a change to my streaming editor thingy that I just demoed. So I
Yeah.
make some change in FileMaker.
Yeah.
And then I would hit the commit, that message commit button, and write down, oh, I changed this or I changed that.
Uh-huh.
And then I'd be done, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? And
I
then
mean,
person
yeah.
2 would do the same.
Right. I think the most important thing is usually, like, especially one of the topics I like to talk about is a little bit of we have a lot of in the community, we just have a lot of people with a lot of really old systems. And they just have a lot of detritus in them that, like, you can remove a lot of the code because FileMaker's like a double-edged sword. The fact that you can go very quickly is both a positive and negative, because you end up leaving behind, like, I was thinking this, but then I changed my mind and I went this way and I did this other code, but I never removed all this approach, right? So now you're left with all this extra baggage that you don't need. And so as an example here, I'm gonna do a couple of things with Brendan here, a live demo. But like, if I go look at the dashboard for meetings, I'll see layouts. I have 30 layouts. I have 25 of them are unreferenced. If I go look at the list of layouts, so here's the list of layouts. Here's a reference count of the references for each layout. And I look at this list and I just kind of eyeball it. And I tell Brendan and I say, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and delete all these layouts from layout 15 all the way to the end. I'm not going to notice that this one here has one reference, but I'm going to just tell him to remove that. And a couple of things. So he's going to do that real time right now. And we're going to see a couple of things. We're going to see this number right here change, right? This layout number 30 is going to drop down. These layouts are going to disappear, right? And he's going to add an analysis to have that kind of work done. So the thing with FileMaker is if you don't use any of the tools that are out in the community, it's so easy to introduce problems.
Mhm.
Over the years, they've gotten better and they've done things to, like prevent you from causing a mess. So Brendan just removed that code. It's updated it for me. This number over here now changed, right? So it went down from 30 to 14. I still have 11 layouts that are unreferenced. I can click on this number. I can see these layouts. I can go into them. There's no references of them. We'd have to double check to see if I'm using any indirection, go to layout by number, by name. But if I'm not using that, I could go ahead and get rid of these because there's no references of them. And now I have less code to maintain, right? So Brendan made a change And if I go look at his change that he just submitted, so then he made 309 deletions. And 309 deletions are because there was a lot of objects on the layouts. So he actually removed not only the layouts, but he actually ended up removing as a byproduct all the objects that were on all those layouts, etc. Right? So we have all those changes documented there. So this report shows you kind of all the changes that have occurred. And again, you might not want to run, like you might not do this level of change that often. So this is a lot right now. I mean, adding and removing a lot of layouts, but I want to show one other thing here. I get to the bottom here. It's not at the bottom. It's at the top. So let's see here. So yeah, here, for example, some script steps that got changed as a byproduct of that. And so if I go in here, there was one layout that was referenced by a script, and that's this one here, script INSP controller copy. I had to go to layout, and that, because he deleted that layout, it introduced a problem in here. So there's all kinds of updates that happen with regards to dependencies and other things, which is a really complex part of this process. And it just tracked that change, even though the script wasn't changed or the step wasn't changed directly. There was an influence on that step to kind of highlight the fact that, hey, something changed over here as well. So like, again, remember that example I showed of the XML that has the catalog structure? So we're reading the catalogs and we're saying, here, there's changes to these catalogs. However, I never made a change to that actual script, and so it picked up that change. So that's one example. Again, like your question about working like real time. Like for example, let me go back to the dashboard and go back to scripts. This is the controller script. And so, for example, there might be a lot of code in here, and I might want to add a note, or let's add a tag. Let me add a tag in the tag management here. Optimize, and I'm going to choose a style. I'm going to create this tag as a style of orange. I'm going to add it. I'm going to add some other tags. And so this is really nice also the way this turned out. This was also work that we had before in Inspector. And so now I've added tags to the solution, and I can apply those tags to anything. So for example, I can add the to-do tag here. And if I go show the tags, you'll see the to-do is on there. I'll add optimize. I'll add the same thing over here. I'll optimize. Okay, so now I have optimize on two scripts, right? I can, this is the work of Mark Scott. This is Logicator integration, and I can search on tags, and I can search for to do or optimize, and it'll find all the scripts that have those tags, right? So Logicator is a really elegant way to search on specific things. Searching is really, really key. But not only that, but for example, Brendan could come in here and he can put in a comment in here about this inspector controller script, and then I can see that comment and read what he typed in there, right? So it's a collaborative tool. The other cool thing about these tags and notes, by the way, like for example, because we can run hundreds of analyses or thousands of analyses, this number can get quite high, right? And so, if I decide we're done with the big sprint, we want to reset everything, I want to basically clear it and run it over again, so I could reset the solution and process it again. I'm not going to do that right now, but if I do that, I never lose my tags or notes, because the tags or notes are associated by the UUIDs. And then when we reprocess them, all the tags and notes relink themselves back to the items. So like, it's like, you have a comment that you can attach to a field, but you can't attach a comment to a value list necessarily. And so you can attach comments or notes to anything, anywhere, and they will relink themselves. So again, it's this collaborative nature of leaving comments or notes for your peers so that you know, like, oh, be careful with this script because this is very fragile. Don't rename it or whatever, et cetera, right? So there's a lot of cool stuff like that.
Vince,
Any
how
oth-
do you like? Can you sort of generate like a total change log report? So if I go to do a deploy from development to production, can I get a kind of a snapshot of, okay, this is the stuff that's happened in there. So when I have a bug in production, I can kind of reference something back, or what would be the workflow for that?
Yeah, right now, like if you look at all the analyses, these are all the analyses. These are the letter M here stands for manual. You'll see an S for when it's a schedule. And so you'll see like you'll see who generated it. Like Brendan ran this over here. Brendan ran it over here. When he generated the XML and it processed it, it found this many deletions, this many modifications, etc. Right? We're working on that in a kind of a way that we can report it. But right now, it's basically a change from what happened last. So like if I were to go look at this one here, I'm basically going to see those changes. Okay, so I'm going to see, and by the way, it's also the so this is one modification here, and then one, two, I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. Yeah, five deletions. And so like the modifications, if you look at the modification item, the script step change, you can see all the attributes of what changed, right? So you don't have like a snapshot of like saying, oh, here's a point in time, and then here's when you went live, and give me all the changes that we went from what we were to this deployment, right? So that's something that we're working on for some future update, and there's cool things coming soon in regards to that. But right now, what it's telling you is the changes since the last process of XML, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Stefan asks, I might have missed it, but can you touch on workflow for multi-file solutions?
Yeah, sure. Multi-file solutions. Brendan, did you want to speak about that?
Yeah, sure. So with multi-file solutions, when you add the add-on, I think it adds a couple scripts to your solution. One of them is the insp controller, and the other one is insp process XML. Actually 3 scripts, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to, maybe I'm not zoomed. Oh yeah, I did zoom out. Sorry. Yeah, those are them. Insp controller, insp process XML, insp generate single XML. So for multi-file solutions, what you would do is you would select the generate single XML script, and you would paste it into any other solution that you're connected with. And you kind of have to choose like a main file. Your main file is going to be the one where you push the button in to generate everything. And then the generate single XML is going to be called from here. And so, yeah, I wish, we could probably find a more elegant solution to this, but, for now, there's just a section we cordoned off that's like, hey, add all your other files here, and just follow the pattern that we have going on. So yeah, you would call that script in your other files, basically.
Yeah, and then there would be one controller script that would handle kind of managing where it's getting output, and then all the calling all the other files to generate their XML in the same place, and that's all handled by the integration. By the way, all you have to do is just call that script in your other files, and if you wanted to, if you had all your files locally and not like if for local development, you could also put the list of file names in here, and it would generate the XML for all the open files that you have currently. Again, the drawback with this is you're sending the XML to the server. It's not live, but this totally works. You have 5 open files locally, give them the file names, it'll generate the XML locally and then send it to the server. Manually upload is the same thing. Generate your XML, put it all in a folder, send it to the server. Multi-file support is working just fine. Any other questions?
Does the change, Stuart asks, does the change log show the text that is added or removed from scripts and calculations?
Yeah. Let's see here. like I showed, let me see the one I showed. If I go back to here and I go back to analysis, I think it was this one. So in a sense, this one is a byproduct of the fact that I deleted a script. I deleted a layout, and this one shows the parameters of that script step where go to layout was referencing this layout, and now it's not referencing a layout. So you actually see the textual representation of the step and how it's changed. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, and I'll just add, it's pretty cool with
Mhm.
calculations too, because you can see the whole calculation here. It's a little bit cramped for space if you have like a huge calculation. Yeah, and then it's also nice if you click show diff, it'll show you like what exactly changed within that calculation. So yeah.
And another question is, does it show the actual script lines? I guess the line numbers, perhaps.
The line number is here, step
or the
number
change.
30, right? That's step number 30. If we go look at that script, that's step number 30. That's this one here. Step number 30, that's this one. There's your bug right here. Okay, so like in the header right here, script is this script. The step is go to layout, and this is the step number. So that's the step number or the line number if you call it that. So does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, sorry, I guess I'm not, it's showing the problems, but does it show what you actually added or deleted from a script? So does it show the actual script lines you've added or the script lines you've deleted? Or does
Yeah,
it
so
just
let me-
say
Let me just
line
add
numbers were added or deleted?
let me add another step right after that problem right there. Where was it? Is this the one? Yes, 30 over here, 30. So let me go here and add set variable, var, and then we'll just do left, some number, some random number, and then the number. So I added that. I'll actually add, yeah, so we'll just do that. We'll run it, get over here, go back to dashboard. I'll hit the option key. I'll just run it. It runs it. It runs the integration. If I go look, I'll see it. There's actually a lot more changes because, so these step numbers here, they got moved, right? Because I
Yeah,
moved,
actually
yeah,
the
so-
index on all those items incremented by 1, which is
Yeah.
why it captured the change for everything.
Yeah, so we're gonna see about, so but this is the step that was added. And then in terms of the script, there's just a number of steps are changed. Now I was at 133 to 134. I mean, we have some ideas on how to improve this and reduce the noise and all that, but and there's other stuff that is getting worked on that will actually make this a lot more clearer and more transparent. But that's coming. So, but hopefully this answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I'm just going to launch a quick poll here. I don't know. I've never
Okay.
tried these before. Let me know how it works. But it's basically just wondering how many people use tools. I don't know if that popped up on your screen. Did it? Yeah.
It did pop up on mine.
And does it show the results?
I did not see the results come up.
So right now we are at 18% people say they don't use a tool and 82% say they do. I'm curious, what is the number one thing that's like, this always helps me out when I get into this problem? Is there like a real common challenge?
Well,
Like, whether it's when people make changes to a calculation, or is it just the diffing or the additions of things? Or
I think the number one thing is I'll say three things. Okay, one thing is you want to like look at a solution again, like these little gray bars here tell you unreferenced code. Basically, oh, you know what? Could we get rid of all these that are unreferenced? Let's just have code that we're using. right? Let's get rid of all the stuff that we're not using. So I could go to this layout. And so this is kind of a task list for me. Like I'm going to see these 11 layouts. They're unreferenced. Let's get rid of them. Let me go and let me go ahead and remove layout 13 and meetings copy. So if I go to here and I go into layout mode and I go ahead and remove these 2 layouts that are unreferenced, I delete them. They're gone. It has a lot of objects on them, probably going to take a while. So let's see, I run it. So now those objects are gone. I hold the Option key down, it runs it. If I look here, those layouts are gone. So if I look at my dashboard, that number went from, remember now, where is it, layout? 14 to 12, and now I have 9 layouts that are unreferenced. So I'm getting rid of stuff that I don't need. That to me is kind of cleaning up your code and getting in a state where it's like, okay, this is our code base. This is like what we're working with. The other thing is all these warning signs. Okay, what is that? Okay, I have a lot of problems here. I have some, this is a field on a layout. What's the problem? This field has a value list that's associated with it, but it's broken. Okay, so I can go and fix that and address all the problems, right? Get into a state of, so those two items are kind of driving my work to reduce the number of problems and the number of this popped up as well. Cool. Yeah, it's okay. So it helps me kind of drive the code to keep the code base really clean, and also kind of helps me get rid of problems, etc. That's 2 things. And then the other thing I would say is if you don't use any tool, then you're kind of living haphazardly, because it's so easy to break stuff. You have no idea. Like I can go into custom functions and I could just go and delete, a bunch of custom functions, and I can cause problems anywhere, right? I just delete them. And then, so like if, as a matter of fact, I don't like any of these custom functions, I delete them. It doesn't warn me, right? It doesn't warn me that you're using calculations. And so now I've introduced all kinds of problems, right? So this way, if you go look at those custom functions, let me go look at those custom functions. Here's 7 of them. And so you'll see like, oh, these ones there's the 2 references of that. It's in this field on this layout object. So if I remove those, I'm breaking this stuff. So it's good. Like, that saying, what is it? Call before you dig. You ever see those signs?
Yeah.
So it's like, you want to avoid a situation where it's like, damn, I just cut my internet line. I'm out of, internet access for like a day or a few days because I just chopped the line. So it's those are the 3 things I would say that, are for me really, really important. And then, kind of getting insights as a team, adding comments and notes and tags on things, and know that they're going to persist from, even resetting a solution, etc. Those are things that, collaboratively, when you work with a team, it's nice to put little notes about, watch out for this, or, what we did here is not optimal. We should refactor this, etc. So again, the communication is really important, and these things are really important to us. So hope that answers your question, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reach out to everybody here. It's like, what tools or tooling does everybody actually feel that they need in terms of being able to produce better code? You mentioned about cleaning up. I think that was your first item, basically cleaning craft, and that's so important in any code base, and it's a constant challenge because it's so easy. And I swear, I think our community does it the worst, because when you typically working in a bigger team and you're committing to say Git or something like that, somebody else is doing that review before they're merging in your request. And they're looking for things like, hey, you left a debugger statement in our console log, or what's this commented out code? But I see that when I pair with people all the time, I'll see massive pages of commented out code.
Yeah.
And I say, how come you got that commented out? Well, this is how it used to be. Well, if you already have the new one, why are you hanging on to this thing?
Exactly.
And they're going through it and they're getting confused what they've commented out, and just delete it, let it go.
Yeah.
Right. So
Brendan is gonna also say things along the same lines. Yeah. He's always a champion for deleting stuff. So Yeah. I'll show one other thing that we did recently, which is kind of cool. So let's look at Inspector. Inspector is an analysis of Inspector. We're still kind of running some new things in here, but what we did recently is we added some AI integration. And so what we're able to do is we added some generating of summaries. And so we sent the code to ChatGPT, and so like here's the code. Here's this code, right? So it's got some commented out code. It's at reset registration fields and all this, right? And so a lot of it is commented out, but to your point, Charles. So like if I go reset to demo, if I go look at the summary, this is resets a FileMaker database to a demo state by performing various actions such as renaming files, removing global fields, and resetting account permissions. That's a short summary. This is a more longer summary. So if you had a code, like if you have a solution that you inherit from somebody and it's got like 600 lines of steps in a script, wouldn't it be nice to just read like 2 sentences worth of summarized text that tells you like what this script is doing, its main purposes? And this is, so what we're doing is we're generating the summary, and then we're using AI to also be able to search semantically on it. So what you can type a search string in here and run it, and then it'll find all the scripts that have possible matches vis-a-vis a semantically meaning of that summary in these scripts. So that's
really
cool.
useful.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
so you can say, find me all the things that deal with the invoice line generation, or potentially even delete it. Oh, that's really neat.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a really good use case for some AI and for like the semantic searching.
Yeah, I mean, I loved your demo, by the way. I'm thinking along the same lines in terms of some other stuff that we're going to explore doing. But yeah, we're thinking of all kinds of interesting places where we can sprinkle in some AI capabilities, and there's more coming. So we have a lot of ideas in that area. So
I really like the idea of the search though, because there's so many times we have so many script names, you have, and our style of coding is we have very little in the table of occurrence graph, but we have a lot of the complexity sits in the scripts themselves.
yeah,
And you can only reduce complexity of a system so much.
right.
And we quite often it's like, what was the name of the script that does something about provision of domain, or was it delete? There's a host name, provision name, domain name, and you're not really quite sure what the name is. So you kind of guess at the searches, and then you're looking through the script. Nope, it's not that one. This one's very close, but it's not quite that one.
Right.
And I think that would be quite useful.
Yeah, searching is definitely a key aspect of this, and we have global searching that we had in Inspector 7. We brought that back so you can have a global search across your schema, across your calculations, and now we added something cool that called across history. So, for example, I just made a change to an account. When you make a change to something, you see a little icon over here. So that tells you like, oh, this account changed. So if I click on it, what it'll do is it'll open up the latest analysis, and it'll show you like, okay, Bob existed when the baseline import happened. Okay, this account existed. And then I made a change. The account name was new account. I changed it to Bob. Let me go make another change to that. So like I'm going to change Bob's account. I'm going to change it to another privilege set. I'm going to add a comment and require password change. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run that. So I'm going to run it. Oops, sorry, over here, run it. And so now we're going to go back to close this window. Where was I? Go back to accounts, go look at that change now. So now you're going to see 2 changes. The first change over here, by who, at what time. And then we're going to see, 2 attribute changes, 5 attribute changes. Here we'll see the privilege set changed. We'll see the description changed, etc. But what if I go in here and I go and I say, you know what? I don't need Bob anymore. So Bob is gone. I run it. So I run it. And now if we go look over here, Bob is going to disappear. And sure enough, any second here, it's gone. Bob is gone. I I can't find Bob anymore anywhere, right? So I don't know, you know, like I can't document that change. But if I go to the dashboard and just do a search for Bob, right? And what's going to happen is I'm going to find Bob in my deleted history log, and then I can view the changes of the that item. So Bob existed when I did my baseline. If it didn't exist and it was added at some point during the analysis process, this bar would be green. And then you'd see Bob was added by Vince at this time. And then all the changes that have occurred in between that point and the point it was deleted. If it still existed, this bar would be purple, and the account Bob would say the account Bob still exists, right? So you actually have a kind of a whole change history log of one item. And this applies to anything, a script, a field, a layout, value list, whatever. So that's really cool, I think. Any
I
questions?
suppose you can even use some AI there. Like since you already have that integrated with the search and everything, you could sort of summarize the changes even. It's like it looks like this field was deleted, or the invoice now calculates based on current date versus the old date. And you know, there's almost no limit there, like
Yeah,
where you can go
yeah,
with that.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the only
Wow.
limit is cost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
But then again, like what was it? We looked at the cost to generate all the script summaries for what Inspector has. How many scripts? Inspector has 357 scripts. I don't know. It was like we're talking cents, really.
Mhm.
But if we used the ChatGPT 4 Turbo, that was more costly. That was definitely more costly. We noticed a big difference. But this was using 3.5 and it was very economical. And those summaries are only generated or regenerated if a script changes. Once you've generated the summaries, if the script doesn't change, you don't need to generate it again, right? You just generate it when a script changes. So
Do the users have to supply their own API key, or was that?
yeah,
Yeah,
they have
yeah,
to.
okay, so that's fine. It's
That's
cheap
it.
enough anyway. That's nothing compared to the cost of trying to debug something for 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I hope that gives you, I mean, I know we had some other questions, but I'm happy to kind of stay on. I know you had other topics you wanted to cover today, Charles.
Yeah, I wouldn't
but I'm
mind just talking about like how you went about you know, basically retooling and respinning your whole application, because that sounds like or at least it looked from your talk like it was a big
Yeah. I would love to answer these questions. I mean, both from my point of view and from Brendan, if he has any opinions as well. But from the way I look at it, because I've been doing this for such a long time, when I saw the XML, for me, it was like, oh, first off, I'm going to have to, you know, translate and recode all the XSLs that we have that process this data. And so that was one massive undertaking. And so that, you know, but before diving into there, the way I like to work is like, oh, there's this new feature. I like to learn about the feature and explore it. And so like I'll, you know, like kind of tease out like a prototype. And then Brendan's also very, very keen on these kinds of ideas, which is like, I remember looking at building a prototype where I showed Luke, who's one of my friends and a colleague at Beeswax, a little movie I had built about like the proof of concept. Like, here's XML, and let me make a change. And now I'm able to identify the places where those changes have occurred without having to process a lot of XML and bring everything in again, right? So I had this proof of concept, like in a like a demo video that I put together, and I showed it to Luke. This was 5 years ago. This is crazy, you know. And at that time, it was like, yeah, I think we can do this. I think we can do this. And so based on that was this whole journey that took a long time to go down, and with a lot of bugs in XML, and there's still things they have to correct and all this. But that's kind of my answer to your question, which is I like to, you know, kind of build some idea or model in my head to prove that this is possible.
Yeah,
And then
proof
I
of
like,
concept.
yeah, proof of concept. Yeah. Brendan, anything you want to add?
Not too much. Like I think I joined working on Inspector 7, you know, kind of maybe fairly early on, but it was still sort of like a product of Inspector 6 and 5 and kind of like a continuation of those
Yeah.
ones. So when I jumped into 7, there were, you know, as I was working on it, there was like, ooh, wouldn't it be nice if we like simplified this part or if we like consolidated this part, you know, and it's oftentimes when you're coding, you get into these you know, situations where it's like, oh, let's add this exception here, right? Or something like that. And then it kind of carries over and over and over. And then pretty soon it's like you're trying to figure out how a piece of code works, and then you can't really do it, and you have to spend some time looking at it and figuring it out. But so yeah, so like a lot of like when we restarted for 8, I think one of my goals was just like simplify and everything and like make it consistent and treat everything the same way so that we reduce those number of exceptions. And, you know, that's how like we get to the state where like, oh, when we want to implement like put a new feature, like for example, tags into Inspector 8, now it's really easy to just add the like write the scripts for adding tags and then just apply them to every single area across the board without adding in like a bunch of exceptions. And it's like it kind of simplifies the whole thing, really. You know, there's still some times where we can't really do that. You know, for example, like sorting, like you still need an individual sort step for each area. You know, you can't do it dynamically. And that's kind of one of my favorite words, dynamic. Like just make it, you know, just make it work no matter what. So anyway, that's like, that's what I really enjoyed, like problem solving on Inspector 8 was kind of figuring out like, okay, how do we make this work across every single area, but also like, you know, keep it performant, keep it fast, keep it maintainable, especially if other developers are looking at the code in the future. So that was kind of an enjoyable experience for me working on it. Yeah.
So that sort of brings up, you know, when to refactor. And I think really you refactor on 3 points, right? You refactor when performance of your code, existing code base is inhibiting you from doing something, when there's some kind of capacity that your code just can't do this new thing that you needed to do. And then looking back retrospectively, it's for maintenance, right? Because it's you can refactored code generally you can maintain easier. And it's funny that you touched on exactly all of those.
I would add one more.
Yeah.
I would add one more. So like, for example, you know, perfect example, perform script on server with callback. Oh, wow. Could we use this in some ways in a better
new capability?
Yeah,
Right.
some new capability comes along and it's like, oh, you know what? That's actually even cooler in the sense that like, you know, you could, I haven't done this, but this is an experiment I talked about with Brendan. And it's like, you could build your own threading kind of process or something where you invoke a master controller script that just sits there waiting. It has and then every child is a thread that goes off and does some task. And you have like 10 or 20 of them. And the master controller knows that I have 20 children running threads or processing. And those things can be doing different things, right? And then when they report back to the master, because they're all linked by some unique ID, they can report and say, hey, I'm done my report. Here's my result. Here's my result. And then when that master controller script is done, it can send a call back to the client saying, hey, I've done your research. And you know, your insurance quotes are here from the different vendors that you asked me to search on. And you know, you tie that to AI, and now you've got like some really cool and compelling, interesting possibilities of you know, you have different models out there. What if you use the different models to ask it different questions, and you can gauge the response of each response individually and say, oh, this actually is a better response, and you know, etc. It's just like buying airline tickets when you go to kayak or whatever. So that's a fourth option, you know, refactor.
For sure. How did you guys go about like figuring out what features that you wanted to do? So, you know, you have version 5, version 6, version 7. Obviously, when something new like the ability to have this cataloging came out, that's justification for really pushing into a new version. But is there any other sort of community gathered features that you start to include?
Yeah, I mean, we have kind of I don't know, a guidance body, or I forget what the right term is, but kind of a body of people who contribute to, like, oh, I wish we could do this or that, and so we toss around ideas internally, and we have a long list of ideas. So that comes to us internally from the large number of developers of Beeswax. But we also get feedback from people in the community who either use it or don't use it, and they say, you know, I'm struggling with this, and I wish there was a way to do that, and that kind of gives us ideas on you know, something that we should add. I mean, Inspector 7, a lot of this is a lot of these features actually exist in Inspector 7 already, and some of these were just like, okay, let's port this over, but let's do it in a much more streamlined and elegant way. And so we refactor the code, etc. So there's, I guess, you know, one is lessons we've learned. Two is we get feedback from the community, or we're in the community, we see what people are struggling with, and we try and see if we can find a solution to that. And then internally as well, we get ideas from our team internally.
What about testing? How do you go about testing? Do you have like a community, that same community for beta testers, or?
Yeah, we have a community of people internally who are testing. Unfortunately, this release relies on the next version of FileMaker, so we can't put it out there into the community necessarily for people to test unless they have an ETS version. But we do internal testing. But with testing, I would say this reminds me of something that Luke pointed out to me a long time ago. He used to work at Microsoft, and he said at Microsoft there was this culture to, when you build a product, you have three kinds of people. You have one, you have the visionary person.
Yeah.
Two, you have the coder. And three, and I would say even maybe there's a fourth person, but that the third person is the actual QA person. And those are different and distinct roles. So in a sense, you have the visionary person that says, you know, I'd love it if it did this. And then you have the implementer, the coder, the person who goes in and makes it happen. And then you have a third party person that looks at what the vision was for this feature and tests it to see that it works according to what it should behave like. And I've come to learn that those three roles can make a very successful product, you know. And at Beeswax, we have people who are very passionate in all three of those roles sometimes. Brendan, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you got it all. Yeah.
If anybody hasn't, I'll post a link in a few minutes to Vince's talk at Engage, and I do recommend watching that. It's all in the stuff that if you're a real propeller head engineering type person like myself, you don't really want to listen to be honest with you at first, until you start to appreciate how important all of these things are and it's not till years down the road that you can acknowledge that. You mentioned something that from I think it was the Navy SEALs, there's a quote in there, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah.
And I think, is it the Days of Thunder or something like that? He says the same kind of thing, you know, driving smooth or some kind of a comment like that, similar. Maybe you can touch on that and from a technical aspect, and then maybe again from a business owner aspect as well.
Yeah. So and I kind of got this inspiration also a little bit in tangentially from you, because you're involved in listening to talks from other communities of development. And I listened to one talk in particular that was about refactoring. It was all about refactoring code red, I think it was, or something like that. But anyway, going back to this topic of slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I mean, if you move, and FileMaker allows you to do this, like move quickly and just do stuff, and you never test it, you'll be surprised. Like, oh, you know what? Then you're dealing with debugging, and you really want to instill this sense of like confidence in your code. I know this code works. I've tested it. I've tested every piece of it. So now I'm like putting that part behind me, right? I don't have to worry about that code, right? I can build on top of that confidence that I know that like this other piece works. It handles exceptions, it handles errors. And I would say, you know, oftentimes like Brendan also helped build a transaction framework before transactions were native in FileMaker. And he had some great exception handling in that code to inform developers like, oh, you forgot to add this table occurrence for this reason. It's required. And so people would add, you know, code, and then when it runs the transaction, not only does it fail, it tells them exactly what to fix, right? So when you move quickly, you don't end up you know, doing that due diligence to make sure things are solid. And then you end up paying for it later. I give the example of like, I watch my son go to the fridge and open up the fridge and pour the milk in a glass, and the milk spills on the counter, and he's in a big hurry and all. And I say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You know, like I say, now you got to clean up that mess before you go. So like, if you would have taken the time to just pour the milk, you know, gently, you would have poured the milk, put the milk back in the fridge, drank your cup, and gone, right? Now you have to clean it up, which takes more time. And so he gets it. He gets it. I hope that's a good analogy or example.
I find when I'm debugging stuff with people and repair coding, that I generally probably, my team knows this, the most common thing I say is slow down,
Yeah.
right? Let's assume our facts. And every time one of our, I think, I'm not sure if Eduardo's on our team. Eduardo's the only one I think on our team. He goes about this, we go, because we've been pairing for like years. We sort of think on the same, not to be metaphysical, but the same kind of pace, we'll say that. And you know, when you go really fast and you're trying to debug something, you get your facts, your base, I call them basal facts or base facts of whatever it is you're trying to deduce. They become fuzzy. And the minute something changes in there, you realize you have a new discovery, like, oh, that variable's getting set over here. That you have to sort of rebuild all of your base facts. And when you go fast, you never bother to do that. So you know, it takes an exceptionally long time to figure something out. And what I find is I go back to the beginning every time. It's like, okay, let me see. What do we got here? What do we got here? What do we, like, what do we know? And then keep rebuilding that foundation of logic there, which is really important. Did you find the same thing? Is that sort of applied to your business as well, or is it a different paradigm there?
I would I mean, on the business side, I'm not so much like Luke, Julian, and other people at the business on the business side, watching out for, you know, and Julian's dad, I mean, when he was participating in the company, he's the president of the company. Julian's dad used to teach economics at Berkeley, and he, you know, I mean, Julian's business has been around for, oh my God, 30 plus years, something. And, you know, we've gone through economic recessions, and, you know, slowly the company has navigated those waters, and they did a great job. They did a great job. You know, it's a challenge. It's a job that I would not want to have, you know, because you're looking at different things. You're looking at things in a business sense. It's like, where do we need to cut back? Where do we need to be careful? You know, I'm looking at things from a coding perspective, but one can almost make an analogy and say these things kind of compare in a sense, like, but you know, on different domains or different areas of discipline. So so in that sense, I'm not like a business person, but they could easily apply there as well, or other ideas as well.
When you and Brendan were working on this version of Inspector Pro, did you pair a lot together?
I like pairing with Brendan. It's a lot of fun because I don't know how Brendan feels, but I get a lot out of it. And sometimes it's cool because the pairing, as you know, leads to better outcomes. I would say often 95% of the times leads to better outcomes. It's just like, hey, Brendan, have you considered, because I'm longer with this code base than Brendan is, I will bring an insight that he might not be aware of. Like, oh, have you considered this? You know, oh, I did not consider that. You're right. You know, let's, you know, I would want to leave some opportunity for Brendan to comment on it, but I really enjoy it.
We have a
Yeah.
product synergy. Sorry, Brendan. We have a
Oh,
product
no,
synergy.
go ahead.
And you mentioned in your talk about UX designers. I think you mentioned in the talk about 2 UX designers who bounce ideas.
Yeah.
And Jordan, the CEO of the company, actually, I think he's on the call. He works with 2 designers, Pearson and Anna, and the 3 of them, they're all creatives and they bounce ideas constantly back and forth. And I have to just bite my tongue if I sit in on the calls. I try not to, because I just want to, okay, let's just try this and just move forward, right? And they ultimately end up making a better product because they go a little slower. They constantly pair in terms of design. Somebody will come back with a design. What do you think of the placement of this button? And they'll talk about it for 15 minutes on just the position of the button and what the user will think. And it's way more time than any of us in our community would ever spend on a button. We just put it red and then they'll see it, and then we'll move on to the blue button and the green one. So I think the pairing is super, super important. Brendan, you're gonna touch base, sorry, on pairing, I think.
Oh no, yeah, like I enjoy it quite a lot, and I get a lot out of Vince's insight. Sometimes he'll put something into perspective for me that I hadn't considered, and I was like, oh yeah, you're totally right. Yeah, and so I totally agree with Vince. It's like when we pair program, I feel like we get a lot more done at the end of the day than if we just worked on it individually. So yeah, it's been great.
Do you guys
working with him there.
did you do sort of code reviews? Like, hey, I wrote this script. Can you have a look at it? Let's just walk through what it does. That type of thing as well. Or?
Yeah, I'll say something to that. I usually write it and Brendan makes it better. Yeah, definitely. I'll look at something that Brendan has done and it's like, wow, that's so elegant. That's so cool. And it's interesting because this leads to another topic. I'm well aware that you're exposing your team to, and that is like a few weeks ago or maybe a month ago, Brendan did something and he says, oh, let me ask ChatGPT for an answer. And, he got an answer, and I don't remember if it was right or not, but I remember I was struggling with some XSL recently. And I just like, I walked away from the computer, said, I can't deal with this anymore. Went for a walk. And then on my walk, I remembered, hey, Brendan asked ChatGPT, let me come back to it. And let me ask ChatGPT. So like, I'm like skeptical about this, but like, I'm like a convert at this point. Like I gave it the code and I gave it the outcomes of what I needed. And I said, figure it out. Like, and it gave me back XSL that was runnable. Like it didn't like, run into some syntax problems, whatever. It ran. It didn't get the right output, but it ran. And then I said, oh, okay, like some refinements there, like, oh, you didn't get this quite right. And you need to do this a little bit better and think about this. And it kept getting the results. Eventually it got to a result. We refactored it a little bit or whatever. But I mean, that's pair programming, but with an assistant. And I think that's the big wave that's, it's just amazing what's possible. Really, really incredible. And
There's some amazing projects out there. If anybody wants to Google Devin, DEVIN, not Devin, the FileMaker deployment tool, but there's a bigger Devin. Not that they're little. And it's pretty neat. Basically what some of the emerging techs are, just to sort of to augment that, is this concept of giving agency to ChatGPT or to any large language model. So the idea is that you query, say, GPT, and you say, I have this code, or I have this problem, or solve this problem, and it kind of comes up with a few steps to solve this problem, research, almost more or less a scientific method to solve a problem. And then you give it the tools to do those things. So for example, if I say debug my FileMaker script, and you say, generally when you wanted it to do that, you would say something to the effect of, and we can't exactly do this with FileMaker because of there's just not that much community knowledge there. But you would say something like, debug my script. So then it would go back to FileMaker and it would say, let me request a DDR pull that data down and then review the data, and then it would say, oh, I see this is referring to another file. So the agency is giving it the ability to communicate to those third-party tools. One of those tools may be to another server even, or maybe it's to another file or another script, and it would grab that information and then regurgitate that stuff. Very similar to how a person would use GPT. You know, you paste your question in and then you get your answer, and then you say, well, based on this answer, it's not doing that. And it says, oh, I see I've missed this. Because if you kind of can assume that GPT is about, say, 60% accurate, but when you feed it back into itself, that accuracy goes up another fraction as well. So that's something that's really, I think we're going to start to see these agents start to emerge now with these GPTs, and that's going to give a huge amount of additional power to something. I'm not sure if anybody's doing that already. We're looking at doing that even in our tool. So basically we say, create this interface, and then we're going to give GPT the ability to say, oh, what actions do you have? What scripts do you have? What hooks do you have over in FileMaker? And it can actually query that stuff and say, oh, okay, I see what you have here, just like a person would, and then start to integrate those things together.
You know, what's fascinating to me when I did my XSL experiment is like, as soon as I hit the button to run, as like, you know, like a human would have to like, let me think about that. Like, okay, you know, like that variable's over there. And no, it's just like, okay, here's your, you know, like I thought about it, or I did it, whatever. Here's your code. You know, it's like writing out the lines, and then you copy your code, you run it, and it's like, wow, not a single error, but it's not really right, but it's almost there. You know, it's like, it's mind blowing. It's really incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty good. How many people, just maybe even a show of hands or chime in, are using GPT or some other type of generative AI in their daily process for either generating marketing or for content in some fashion, or even code? One person, really? Oh, you guys got to get with it. There must be more than one.
Show my hand. I'm trying to show my hand, but I can't.
Two. Yeah, mine. I think if I go like this, it's supposed to do it automatically. Some kind of there. That's the wrong thumbs up. But so it's super powerful, and it's interesting because I find these LLMs can understand code better than they can write it even if they've never seen the code before. In other words, you can give it a FileMaker script, and it's not great at FileMaker. It kind of can make up stuff, but it can understand the concepts, and just like a human would, we can read, even if it's another language, you can kind of figure out what the code does to some degree. You can say, oh, it looks like it's doing some kind of loop over here. Even just by indents, you can kind of tell with what code does. Does anybody, just in terms of pair coding, and I've thrown this offer out there probably for the last 3 or 4 years, I say I'll pair 1-to-1. Hour for hour, that you want to work on anything, your project, but we'll work on my project for another hour. And I've never had anybody take me up on that. So it's kind of insulting, I think, a little bit to me. It's knocking my confidence down.
You're so generous, Charles.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing. I find when you pair code, for me personally, I don't, there's no distractions. I'm not answering texts. I'm not not even walking off to the bathroom sometimes, kind of thing, just focusing on what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's a super powerful tool.
Yeah. I remember I listened to Mike Bostock give a talk in San Francisco over 10 years ago when he gave a talk with Edward Tufte. This is, you know, the godfather of data visualization, you know.
Yeah, D3 he wrote, right? Bostock.
Yeah, he wrote D3. Okay. He was at Stanford. He wrote D3. Now he's doing stuff with Observable. And there's really cool stuff he's doing these days. But I remember because he was up there giving a talk, but you know, he's such a great, talented coder. He actually showed the process of like him coding something, and a little bit like, you know, your ChatGPT example where you showed like, oh, you know, make this change, and he was actually doing the live coding and saying, you know, oh, this is, I don't like this, you know, the padding over here, I like this better over there, or I need, you know, more. Anyway, so he was refining his data visualization live, And one of the things that he said that I'll never forget, he says, I remove as much code as I add. It's like, wow, that's a cool concept, like a cool philosophy to think that, like, when I add code, I'm thinking of also removing code, like simplifying, or, like not just, adding a bunch of code, but then saying, how can I make this code more compact? You're leaving a legacy behind, because whoever comes after you is going to look at your code. And if it's well documented, well structured, it's a real, how would you say, honor, or not an honor, but a treat to be able to go into someone's code that is well structured, because they had intention to leave you breadcrumbs as to like what it's doing, And so anyway, I'm always thinking of him.
You reference, I forget what it's called, the Happy Coder, the Clean Coder. It's the guy, he's got a channel on YouTube, and I've watched a number of his videos now. The one was,
Oh yeah,
you talk about him. What is his name? I just pasted it.
I
Some
can't
people
remember
from
his
our team
name.
have been watching it as well. It's pretty good. Try to find it in my Slack here. And anyhow, he's got a video blog type thing. Here it is here. Why does Scrum suck? I think is one of his. And let me just share my screen here. So this
Yeah,
guy
go for
here
it.
is
Yeah.
he's got this healthy software developer. If you want to sort of learn like just about medium and small and medium sized teams and just concepts of developing, he really summarizes things good. Almost all of his videos I think are pretty decent. And he talks about different workflow methodologies like Agile and Scrum, and pros and cons, and where people always make mistakes. Talks about daily stand-ups and where people make mistakes, or what's good things to do and why we don't want to be in them at all, and so on. And I thought that was a really good lead. So maybe we can share that with everybody. But there's so many of these amazing amount of knowledge now that we have. There are people just shooting out these blogs on different talks. I follow Evan Yu quite often, and he's the founder of Vue.js. And it's not so much, he doesn't really talk about the whole philosophy of developing in companies, but he does talk about attitude towards solving problems. And that's really, really good. There's so much we can learn there.
Yeah.
You mentioned the book in your talk as well, Creativity Inc. I haven't read that one.
It's a kind of a recollection of the CEO of Pixar. I forget his name. Edward. No. Can't remember his name right now. But yeah. So just the challenges that they went through when they were struggling, and some of the things that some of the risks that they took. And one thing in particular, like I always like quotes. Sometimes the quote that struck out in the book for me was, always take a chance on better. Always take a chance on better. And for me, it's like, well, that's gonna take more time, and I don't know, like, but then the outcome is going to be better. Like, like it's just so much. If you do end up going down that route, it just kind of shows like the passion that you have for your field of work. And it's like, yeah, like let's do it. It takes more time, but like that's the better outcome, rather than like be lazy and like, oh yeah, that's good enough. Like that's the kind of mindset sort of thinking for me.
It all ties together, really, isn't it? Like it's about the testing, it's about the refactoring, when to refactor, it's about pair coding. Everything is about kind of upping your game there.
Yeah, I say one other story. I'll share one other story that I talked about in some of my in my other presentations that is also kind of valuable, and in a sense like talks about this version of Inspector. It's like, this is the way we should have built Inspector in the first place. Like not to process all the stuff all over again. That's like crazy talk, like but we didn't have the means to do that before, right? But I remember we worked on one project, and the client was pretty happy, but then they asked us for, like, oh, we need to do this way, and the outcome was then turned out to be much better. And after about a year or more, we ended up, like, finishing the work. The client was happy, and then the manager of the project looked at me and says, "Why didn't you build it that way in the first place?" And I'm like, like, dude, you're a Mac user. I'm a Mac user. Like, why didn't Apple come out with 10.7 or 10.9 in the first place? Why did we have to suffer through 10.1, 10.2, 10.3? Why didn't they just do that, like, in the first place? Like, it's just the way the nature of this field is. Like, in the process of doing it, your skills get better. There's new opportunities. The community comes up with different ways of thinking about things. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm back to looking at the same problem, but now in a different light. And now it's so much better. And like, everything is different over time, And so yeah. Why didn't you build it like that in the first place?
We have the same thing with BetterForms. Originally, we started, 5.5, 6 years ago, and we didn't anticipate things being as dynamic, even though that's kind of a whole philosophy of everything I do is make it very dynamic and not hardly bound to anything. And even that, we still have some cruft left over in that framework. That's frustrating because we started off with a predefined UI. And then we said, you know what, this almost right away, somebody said, I want to customize this. I want to customize that. I think you can kind of keep it open-minded to say what will work really well for everybody. So now when we come to add a new feature, we code it with that in mind. For example, we added a new API for streaming. But we didn't just make that API have the ability to stream from OpenAI because they're they're not the only source that can do that. So, we added into the spec of the API, there's a key that says, where is the source from, whether it's OpenAI API or Llama or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sort of have some thoughts on where or on keeping things flexible for the future, for future growth. Same thing with any kind of UX. How do we handle that? People would always send us suggestions in the first few years. Hey, just make this, add this, make this thing blue instead of red or whatever it is. And it's like, no, why don't we give you the ability to have your own CSS, and that will solve everybody's problem.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest place you can learn that from is open source software. If anybody is involved in any type of open source software, if you're using any kind of module in GitHub, you can follow an issue, or you can star something and you'll start to follow it so that when there's new commits and things like that, you'll get information. And you can start to see some of the threads and how the maintainers of this open source software think. And they're not thinking about your problem. They're thinking about, you've mentioned a bug or a solution to something. They're antagonistic, and they're saying, can I implement this? Will it, not only, first of all, will it break anything else, but will it work for everybody? And you really got to think about that sort of global perspective as you start to work on something that's shared in terms of a community. And that's what we're always trying to do. We're trying to come up with a feature or a change that won't break anything, ideally. And then at the same time, will it scale well so that people can use it for different things, even though we're using it for one use case. Messaging is something that people are starting to use more of, caching in their apps, all of these kinds of features. They all came out of those suggestions, but we've made them so that they're really, really flexible.
That's such a great, such a great point. Yeah, such a great point you bring up. And that's definitely the case, to have the bigger picture, because when you're short-sighted and you say, I just need the button on there, but wait a minute, what is it you're trying to solve, And so can we give you something that would give you the ability for you, and not just you, but other people who are also struggling with this, but maybe haven't voiced their voice on it, like, to give them that affordance to be able to solve those problems. Yeah, so that's such a great point.
Does anybody have any other questions at all before we finish? We're getting a little tight on time here, so. Or anything that people can chime in on? Some comments? Maybe they all fall asleep, I'm not sure. So, all right. Well, just jumping back, Vince and Brendan, guys, thanks a lot for coming out and sharing some insights. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
How, Vince, how can people get a hold of you or Inspector Pro and learn more?
I'm always open to having people email me. I put my email in the chat. You can go, yeah, you can email me if you want to get in touch with me. I'm on X or LinkedIn or Twitter. Yeah, so just send me an email.
Super, thank you. We'll have our monthly draw here. If you're not, the rules are pretty simple. If you're not here, you don't get a chance. And share computer sound, and let's give it a spin. Shubham, are you still here in the call? I don't see. Are you here? Don't see. Well, are you here? Yeah, I think you're still in the call there. All right, congratulations. I think there's a typo in your name though.
Yes, thank you very much.
Maybe we can personally deliver that. We'll come.
I will be waiting for you with the Porto wine, not Madeira one.
I'll let Madeline know. She'll be insulted. All right, sounds good. Sounds
Have a
good.
nice weekend, guys.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. We're gonna finish up our call. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
And
Charles.
if you want, you're welcome to hang around for post chats. Thanks again.